Hello, yes. I I am an American. Well, I'm definitely from North America, which makes me technically an all-around American. And I know for a fact that as an American, when I talk with my American buddies at the beer corner store, Japan, the entire country of Japan will never ever be allowed to have nuclear weapons. After World War II, even though Japan has proven themselves to be a trusted ally of the United States will never, ever trust Japan to have nuclear weapons. So, Iran, you don't need to feel so bad. You're not the only country that the United States will not let have nuclear weapons. The United States will not let Germany have nuclear weapons. The United States will not let Brazil have nuclear weapons. The United States will not let Cuba have nuclear weapons, or even Australia have nuclear weapons. And the United States, especially, will not even let those sneaky Canadians have nuclear weapons. In fact, the United States, I am an all around American, and I can tell you that Japan, the United States' number one ally, Japan, will never, ever be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Americans, we're putting our foots down. We're putting our foot down. We're putting everything down. And Japan, Japan will never, ever be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Um, yes, my whole life, I was such an athlete. I'm a big sportsman. I grew up playing football, American football. I grew up playing American football. Um, and I drink lots of beer and I go to NASCAR events. I like to watch NASCAR. And I definitely did not vote for Obama. I am an all around American from the United States of America. And I can firmly say that Japan will never, ever be allowed to have nuclear weapons. And neither those Germans either. They make good beer and sausages, but we cannot trust the Germans with nuclear weapons. I wouldn't even trust the Germans with sticks and stones. They could probably figure out a way to. But especially the Japanese. So don't feel so bad, Iran. You're not the only country that the United States will not allow to have nuclear weapons. Yes, I am fully aware that Japan will never, ever be allowed to have nuclear weapons. And neither will Germany, but especially Japan. The United States will never allow Japan ever to have nuclear weapons. So it's not just you, Iran, it's Japan as well, which is America's number one ally. The United States will not even allow to have their number one ally, Japan. Japan will never, ever be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Ever. You know, because after World War II, and there might have crossed some Japanese people's minds that, if they wanted to get even with America after World War II, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, I'm sure it's crossed their minds. I'm sure. It's definitely crossed Canadian Americans' minds. It's definitely crossed our minds for sure. As an American, and I am a full fledged North American from North America, I am a full fledged American, and I can say that we definitely worrisome for Japan to have nuclear weapons. That is definitely a no no. Japan cannot have nuclear weapons. It would just be so easy for Japan to get revenge on America for World War II and Nagasaki and Hiroshima. To just press that nuclear button would be so easy for Japan and tempting. And tempting. So that is why Japan will never, ever be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Never. In fact, there's a whole list of countries that the United States will not allow to have nuclear weapons. Maybe we should form our own support group. These nuclear countries, they think they're so great because they got nuclear weapons. Well, what if all the non nuclear countries all joined together and we formed our own group? Because I know like Germany and Brazil and Argentina and Cuba and Australia. Maybe we shouldn't invite Australia, but Canada and Germany and Japan and Brazil and Cuba. There's so many countries that don't have nuclear weapons. And the United States will not allow it, especially Japan, especially the United States' number one ally, Japan. The United States will never, ever allow Japan to have nuclear weapons. Never. Nope. Sayonara. I don't know how to say no in Japanese, but niet. I know how to say niet. I know how to say no in Russian. Niet. Japan will never, ever get nuclear weapons. Ever. Japan will never allow it to get nuclear weapons. The United States of America, will never allow Japan to have nuclear weapons. Never. And of course, they won't allow Australians to have nuclear weapons either, but that's just common sense. Hello, mate. Crikey, what's this red button over here? Oh, and let's not forget Cuba. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? Because I don't. What happened there exactly? Something with Cuba getting missiles and Russia, whatever. I know that the United States will never allow Cuba to have nuclear weapons either. Cuba will never, ever be allowed to have nuclear weapons, but especially America's number one ally, Japan. America will never allow its number one ally, Japan, never to have nuclear weapons. Because, after World War II, it would be just too much. It would be too tempting. It would be too tempting for Japanese people to want to, get back at America for what America did to Japan with the two nukes that they dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. I mean, honestly, if you were America after World War II, despite how Japan has proven themselves to be such an ally of the United States, if you were American, would you trust Japan to have nuclear weapons? No, you wouldn't trust the Iranians to have nuclear weapons because Trump made a clear point about making sure that Iran never has nuclear weapons. And I'm sure Trump, if you asked him tomorrow in a press conference, which was not my idea, it was not my idea. I'm an American, I'm a North American, a proud North American who plays football and not rugby, football, and I drink beer. And it was definitely not my idea. But if someone were tomorrow were to ask Donald Trump in a press conference, hey, Donald Trump, you won't allow Iran. You say you wouldn't allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. Would you allow Japan to have nuclear weapons? Despite what happened in World War II, Japan has proven themselves to be a trusted ally of the United States. And you can ask Trump tomorrow in a press conference, which was definitely not my idea or Canada's idea. Ask Trump tomorrow, hey, Mr. Trump, we know you said that you would never allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. Would you at least allow Japan, America's number one ally, to have nuclear weapons? Japan?
アメリカ合衆国の大統領であるドナルド・トランプ氏は、イランが核兵器を保有することを決して許さないだろうし、もし明日トランプ氏に、日本が核兵器を保有することを米国が許すかと尋ねたら、トランプ氏はおそらくノーと答えるだろう。アメリカ合衆国のドナルド・トランプ大統領は、イランの核保有を決して認めないだろう。明日の記者会見でトランプに、日本の核保有を認めるかと尋ねたら、トランプはおそらくノーと答えるだろう。
The President of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, will never allow Iran to have nuclear weapons, and if you asked Trump tomorrow at a press conference if the United States would allow Japan to have nuclear weapons, Trump would probably say no also.
アメリカ合衆国のドナルド・トランプ大統領は、イランの核保有を決して認めないだろう。明日の記者会見でトランプに、日本の核保有を認めるかと尋ねたら、トランプはおそらくノーと答えるだろう。
Le président des États-Unis d'Amérique, M. Donald Trump, ne permettra jamais à l'Iran d'avoir des armes nucléaires, et si vous demandiez demain à Trump, lors d'une conférence de presse, si les États-Unis permettraient au Japon d'avoir des armes nucléaires, Trump dirait probablement non également. Der Präsident der Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika, Donald Trump, wird dem Iran niemals den Besitz von Atomwaffen gestatten? Und wenn Sie Trump morgen auf einer Pressekonferenz fragen würden, ob die Vereinigten Staaten Japan den Besitz von Atomwaffen gestatten würden, würde Trump wahrscheinlich auch Nein sagen.
美国总统唐纳德·特朗普先生永远不会允许伊朗拥有核武器。如果你明天在新闻发布会上问特朗普，美国是否会允许日本拥有核武器，特朗普可能也会说不。
Il presidente degli Stati Uniti d'America, Donald Trump, non permetterà mai all'Iran di avere armi nucleari. E se domani in una conferenza stampa si chiedesse a Trump se gli Stati Uniti permetteranno al Giappone di avere armi nucleari, probabilmente Trump direbbe anche no.
Prezydent Stanów Zjednoczonych Ameryki, pan Donald Trump, nigdy nie pozwoli Iranowi na posiadanie broni nuklearnej, a gdybyś zapytał go jutro na konferencji prasowej, czy Stany Zjednoczone pozwoliłyby Japonii na posiadanie broni nuklearnej, Trump prawdopodobnie również odpowiedziałby nie. 미국 대통령 도널드 트럼프는 이란의 핵무기 보유를 절대 허용하지 않을 것이며, 내일 기자회견에서 트럼프에게 미국이 일본의 핵무기 보유를 허용할 것인지 묻는다면 트럼프도 아마 안 된다고 답할 것입니다.
Президент Соединенных Штатов Америки Дональд Трамп никогда не позволит Ирану иметь ядерное оружие. И если бы вы спросили Трампа завтра на пресс-конференции, позволят ли Соединенные Штаты Японии иметь ядерное оружие, Трамп, вероятно, тоже ответил бы «нет».
The President of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, will never allow Iran to have nuclear weapons, and if you ask Trump tomorrow at a press conference if the United States would allow Japan to have nuclear weapons, Trump would probably say no also.
El presidente de los Estados Unidos de América, el señor Donald Trump, nunca permitirá que Irán tenga armas nucleares, y si mañana le preguntaran a Trump en una conferencia de prensa si los Estados Unidos permitirían que Japón tuviera armas nucleares, Trump probablemente también diría que no.
The President of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, will never allow Iran to have nuclear weapons, and if you ask Trump tomorrow at a press conference if the United States would allow Japan to have nuclear weapons, Trump would probably say no also.
Presidenten i Amerikas förenta stater, Donald Trump, kommer aldrig att tillåta Iran att ha kärnvapen. Om du frågade Trump imorgon på en presskonferens om de förenta staterna skulle tillåta Japan att ha kärnvapen, skulle Trump förmodligen också säga nej.
The President of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, will never allow Iran to have nuclear weapons, and if you ask Trump tomorrow at a press conference if the United States would allow Japan to have nuclear weapons, Trump would probably say no also.
O presidente dos Estados Unidos da América, senhor Donald Trump, jamais permitirá que o Irã tenha armas nucleares, e se você perguntar a Trump amanhã em uma coletiva de imprensa se os Estados Unidos permitiriam que o Japão tivesse armas nucleares, Trump provavelmente dirá que não também.